I got pregnant with a little girl unexpectedly when I was only 19. I was in college, totally broke, and the father of the baby broke up with me as soon as I told him I was pregnant. My parents were really disappointed in me and didn't offer me any support. I was all on my own, but knew one thing for sure. I did not want to give up this baby. I would find a way to raise it all by myself. I had a close group of both male and female friends, all of whom were surprisingly excited about the news of the baby. They told me that they would help me raise the baby right on campus. They always say it takes a village to raise a kid. We'll be your village, my best friend Alexis said. I appreciated my friends more than I could say, and I believed them when they said they would support me. It was just hard to picture them taking time out of their busy lives of schoolwork and partying to babysit. Surprisingly, throughout the pregnancy, they did make the time to support me. 2 of my guy friends built a crib from hand. My girlfriends were always there to pick up whatever food I was craving. When I had morning sickness and couldn't go to class, someone was always there taking notes for me. As time went on, I was feeling more and more confident. Maybe I could do this after all. I was about 8 months along, and there were still some things I needed before the baby arrived. I didn't have the money to buy new things, so one of my friends suggested that I check Facebook. People were always giving away things on there or selling them for cheap. I ended up going through to the community Facebook page and making a post of my own. I explained that I was in college and I was going to be having my first baby. I would be grateful for anything anyone wanted to give away. The post got several comments, and a few people offered to drop things off for me at my university, which I was very grateful for. Then I got a message from a woman named Marta. In her profile picture, she looked like she was probably in her 50s at least. She explained to me that her children were all grown up, but she had never been able to get herself to get rid of their clothing. She said she had a variety of sizes that were still in good condition. It would make her happy to know that she was going to give them to someone who would get good use out of them, and that she would be able to give them to me for free. I asked her if we could meet up somewhere to exchange the items, but she explained that she was handicapped and in a wheelchair. I would have to come to her house to pick them up. I wasn't going to complain. After all, she was giving this stuff away to me for free. I asked her when I could come by, and she told me I could come the next day around 8 p.m. I thought it was a little weird that she wanted me to come so late in the day, but I wasn't going to complain. The next evening, I put her address into my GPS and took off towards her house. Thankfully, it was only around 15 minutes away from campus. My GPS pulled me into an older neighborhood. The houses were pretty run down and didn't look very well kept, but I tried not to judge. I found Marta's house without any problem, and even though it was very dark out, I went up to the front door and rang the doorbell. I was surprised when the door swung open and I saw a younger woman standing before me. She didn't look anything like the woman from the pictures. "Hi, is Marta here?" I asked her. "She's asleep actually, but she told me you would be coming. I'm her daughter Maggie," the woman told me. In bed at 8. How strange, I thought to myself. Maggie welcomed me into the spotless house. Family pictures were hanging up around the house, but I didn't see Marta in any of them. Something didn't feel right. I felt it in my gut, but I tried to push the feeling away. "The clothes are upstairs. You can wait in here and I'll just be a moment," Maggie said, leading me into the living room. I took a seat on the couch and she went up the stairs. As soon as she left the room, I started looking around. I walked over to one of the walls and saw that it was covered in pictures from a wedding. It was clearly Maggie's wedding, and she was standing next to some guy who I assumed was her husband. That's weird. Why would she be living with her mom if she's married? I thought to myself. Before I could think about it any further, there was a creaking floorboard sound behind me and I spun around. It was Maggie. She was standing there before me and she was pointing a gun right at my head. My blood ran cold as I stared at her in shock. "You need to listen to me very carefully," she said to me. "Sit on that couch and stay quiet." I did as she told me, my heart beating out of my chest. She grabbed some thick ropes and tied them around my ankles and wrists so I couldn't move. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "My husband wants a baby. He'll leave me if I don't give it to him," Maggie said. I screamed in terror and began thrashing around like crazy when I realized what she meant by that. She looked at the clock nervously before running into the other room. She came back with a long tarp that she placed over the carpet. She had her gun in one hand, and in the other was a very long, very sharp knife. "Please, no, I'll do anything," I begged, desperate to save my little girl. "Please don't take my baby." She looked at me with pure disgust. "You're making far too much noise," she said. Then she grabbed her gun and slammed it into my face. Everything went black. When I came to, I was laying on the floor on the tarp. There was a burning pain coming from my stomach. I glanced down and saw that I was lying in a pool of blood. Maggie was standing over me, a look of pure concentration on her face. She looked concerned. I felt so weak I could barely keep my eyes open. Suddenly, I heard a door swing open. There was someone else there. I could sense it. It was a man. He was screaming and cussing. "Maggie, how could you do this? Have you gone mad?" He was sobbing like a child. Maggie was trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like. The next thing I remember is the sirens. There were so many of them all around me. I had been loaded into an ambulance. I could hear screaming coming from somewhere outside. "Don't worry, miss, you're going to be just fine," said one of the many paramedics who were working over me. The last thing I heard before I blacked out again was the cries of a baby. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to multiple machines. "She's awake," someone said. I looked around and saw that all my friends were surrounding my hospital bed. They all looked worried. "My baby," I muttered. "She's completely fine," Alexis told me. "They got to you fast enough." I felt the relief wash over me. They then told me what had happened after I fell unconscious. Maggie had been pretending to be pregnant for months. She wore a fake baby bump under her clothes to trick her husband. It had been nearly 9 months since she had started the lie, and she knew she had to get the baby from somewhere. She had told me to come that night because her husband would be away on a work trip. She hadn't counted on him coming home a whole day early. He ended up calling the police on her when he realized what had happened. Thankfully, my little girl, who I named Nina, turned out perfectly healthy. My friends kept their promise to help me raise her. I still can't imagine what would have happened if Maggie's husband hadn't come home early that night. Most likely, Nina and I would both be dead. I went to high school before Instagram was very popular. Everyone used Facebook to communicate and connect. I had a decent amount of followers, but nothing crazy like some of the people I went to school with who had thousands. It was nearly spring break of my junior year, and my boyfriend Max, who I had dated for almost 3 years, had just dumped me after cheating on me with a freshman. I was heartbroken. I had been so sure Max and I were going to get married. I couldn't believe he would throw everything we had away like this. Worst of all, the prom was coming up. I had already decided that I wasn't going to go. After all, who was I going to find to go with me at the last minute? My friends begged me to go alone. They said they would make sure to dance with me, but I couldn't do it. It was just too embarrassing. About 3 weeks before the prom, I was scrolling through Facebook when I had a new friend request. I clicked on it, and it was a name I didn't recognize. Calvin Thomas. I clicked on the profile picture and saw it was a stunning guy around my age. He had a football uniform on that showed off his muscles. I checked, and we had a few mutual friends. His bio said he went to a high school on the other side of town. I decided to accept his friend request. Only minutes later, Calvin sent me a direct message. He told me he thought I was really cute and wanted to get to know me better if that was okay with me. I was flattered and told him I was. Yes, I had just gotten through a breakup, but maybe a little distraction would make me feel better. Calvin and I swapped numbers and we began messaging back and forth. He was easy to talk to and he seemed very interested in learning as much about me as possible. He asked a lot of questions, and I felt like the conversation was always focused around me. I would ask him questions about his own life, but he would always give quick answers and then somehow shift the focus back onto me. We texted every day for a week straight. I knew I hadn't known him for long, but I was actually thinking about asking him to prom. I knew my ex and his new girlfriend would be there, and it would feel so good walking in with a new guy on my arm. I knew we would have to meet in person first before I could ask him. After the second week of us texting every day, I decided to ask him out for ice cream. It would be a casual place to meet. He agreed to hang out with me, but asked if I wanted to come to his house instead. His parents were going to be out of town on vacation. I know I sound like a complete idiot, but I was really into this guy, so I agreed. I knew I couldn't tell my parents where I was going. They would never let me meet a stranger at their house, much less a boy. So I had to wait until that night when they were sleeping. At around 11 p.m., I jumped in my car and followed my GPS to his house. Instead of going up and ringing the doorbell, I decided to text Calvin. He responded with a text saying that the door was unlocked and I could let myself in. I twisted the doorknob and stepped inside. No sooner had I stepped in, I was confronted by a man who looked to be around his 20s. He was balding and wore thick glasses. I felt a million emotions at once. First confusion, and then realization, and then terror. I had been catfished. This man had stolen Calvin's pictures. Wow, the man whispered. You're even more beautiful in real life. He reached out and stroked my face, causing me to jump back. Don't be scared of me. You're about to have the best first date of your life, he told me. He then grabbed my arm and yanked me down the hallway into a locked room. Inside the room was a table, complete with a tablecloth. 2 meals sat upon it, along with 2 glasses of red wine. It will be so nice to finally have a real date with you, the man told me. He then gestured towards something on the other side of the room. I gasped. It was a life-size doll wearing a blonde wig. A blown-up picture of my face was taped to the head, and it was wearing a shirt with my school logo on it. The man pulled out a chair and told me to sit. I did so, too shocked to do anything else. He then raised his glass of wine for cheers. Without much thought, I picked up my glass of wine and slammed it on the table, making it shatter. I took the shattered remains and stabbed the man in the chest, and I ran from the house, leaving him screaming behind me. I got into the car and drove away as fast as I could. I called 911 and told them everything that happened. They quickly brought him into custody. It turned out that the man had seen me walking home from school one day and had become obsessed. He'd been stalking me for months. I have a pretty good feeling about what he was planning to do to me that night, and I know how lucky I am that I got away. I was adopted when I was a baby, and I had never met my birth parents. My adopted parents told me that my dad had died before I was born, and they didn't know where my mom was. They only knew that her last name was Kaufman. All my life, I felt like a part of my life was missing. I wanted to know my birth mother, but had nothing to go on. There were like 1 million women in the country with that last name. She could be any of them. I didn't like talking about my birth mother with most people. I felt like it hurt my adoptive parents to talk about, and my friends just didn't understand. One day after school, I ended up opening up about the whole situation with my favorite teacher, Mr. Ellingwood. The only reason I ended up saying anything was because he had once mentioned that he was adopted too. He made me feel better and said that if it was meant for my mom to come into my life, she would. I was shocked one day when I was a senior in high school that I got a Facebook message from someone named Simone Kaufman. I looked at her profile picture and she was a single middle-aged woman. I opened the message and was shocked to read that she was my birth mother. She told me how much she loved me and how much it hurt for her to give me up. She told me about her life, and I told her about mine. I felt like we were really connecting, and I was so happy. When I found out she was living only about an hour away from me, I asked her if she would be open for a meetup. She never answered. I was heartbroken and opened up to my parents about what happened. My dad was furious and demanded to speak with my birth mother about what she had done. He worked for a tech company and decided to track the IP address to see where she was when she had sent the messages. He tracked it easily, but not to anywhere he was expecting. He tracked it to my high school. I was sure it was probably some guy from one of my classes trying to make fun of me, but my dad told me no. The owner of the laptop was Mr. Ellingwood. I had never felt so betrayed in my entire life, and would have never imagined Mr. Ellingwood would hurt me in this way. I admitted to my parents that I had told him about my birth mother, and they immediately contacted the school and the police. It's safe to say that Mr. Ellingwood was immediately fired and got into quite a bit of legal trouble. For me, there's no justice for what happened. Mr. Ellingwood gave me what I thought was a missing piece of my heart, only to take it away. I still hold on to the hope that maybe I'll meet my birth mother one day. If you liked this story, check out the other new video on Anna Horror. I was nearly decapitated on Facebook Live. It's guaranteed to send a shiver down your spine. Sleep tight.